I am very happy to be a deer hunter right now, and very sad that I'm not as good of a deer hunter as I as I want to be. Let me put it that way. We can get to that later, but I want to talk about life out in PA right now. I see you posting a whole bunch of photos of rubs and talking about hunting public land, and I know you've got a little story about one of your hunting buddies you want to share. So where do you want to start, man?
Yeah, I got actually a couple good stories from this season already, but we can start with the rubs.
You don't want to talk about bow mishaps?
And get your buddy,
put your buddy on the spot.
Actually, there's one that you need to hear too that we didn't discuss yet that you'll probably get a kick out of. So
fire away, buddy.
so first story. We have a unit in PA that opens up. There's a couple sections in PA that open up mid-September, and one's not too far from my house. So they all like to get doe tags for that area and start, filling some tags early. Especially one of my buddies is in nurse practitioner school, so he wants to get some stuff out of the way before all his clinicals start and all that kind of thing. So last week he was out, and we have a group text going with all the guys, and he's like, "Oh, I just shot a doe." So I called him up, and I'm like, "Oh, do you need help looking for it?" And, "Oh no, I have a good blood trail." He's like, "I'll call you when I find it." And apparently he told me, if you mention this story, make sure you mention this. But he had apparently got distracted from the blood trail when I called him, and I made a big deal out of it. And he's like, not texting me, not calling me. I'm like, man, I know sometimes the reception out there is spotty. I hope he's all right. So 2 hours later, I get this random text: "Need help stat. Come quick. Bring water. Bad shape." I'm like, oh no, what happened? And then the next one was phone's gonna die. And I had already had his pin for where he was on Onyx. And I drove out there. I called Ronnie. We all remember Ronnie from our last podcast. But Ronnie redeemed himself in this one.
Was Ronnie the guy who snuck into your spot?
Ronnie was the guy who snuck into my spot.
All right. Well, Ronnie's earning his way back into your hunting camp. How?
Right. So Ronnie lives 5 minutes away from where Seth was hunting. And he was like, "Oh, his car's not here." And I'm like, "What do you mean his car's not there? That's where he's at." And he's like, "Oh no, man, his car's not here." So I get one more text from Seth that says down the hill. And I'm like, great. He's down there, laying there with his leg broken or something. We're all freaking out. And, we're probably the best group of people to hunt with because there's, 2 trauma nurses and I'm an intensive care nurse, and Ronnie's a pharmacist, and we have a CT surgery physician's assistant that we hunt with. So we're all pretty and we're all thinking the worst case scenario. Well, here he had went to look for his trail on his Onyx that wasn't maintained by the park. So it was just grown shut. Well, he shot the deer 10 minutes before dark. So he's traipsing around in the dark, point himself in the direction of that trail. And his phone was just about to die. So his Onyx wasn't really, his connection was terrible. And he pointed himself in the direction of a road and just kept walking. Well, he made a lot of good mistakes, didn't bring any water with him. It was 75 degrees out. He was using his bow and his pack as blood trail markers. So he was going back and forth and just got himself dehydrated and turned around and was he was all purple red and "Dude, I don't feel good. You got to bring some water." But it ended up being fine. He got his deer. Ronnie went in there. We all packed it out. Ronnie did a good amount of the heavy duty lifting, so he redeemed himself.
Good. I'm glad to hear that he didn't get totally booted out of your life. So okay, there's a couple things there. You only have to go through that so many times before you have that extra water in your pack, and you bring some kind of flagging tape or tissue paper or something. And it's such a common mistake, and it's such a there's something that happens when you go out on a blood trail where it's so easy a lot of times to talk yourself into, just go a little ways, just go a little ways farther, just go a little ways farther. Or I know I drilled him, whatever. So I'll just go get him. And then it doesn't work out that way. And now you don't have that direction to travel. You lose your trail. It's just such a simple thing that's a lot of people everybody makes that mistake eventually.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's part of the getting your feet wet during the season too, because everybody's getting back at it, and like you forget minute details. It's kind of funny because this guy, you never see him without a Camelback water bottle. Never. Like at work, it's always like it's attached to him. And it's just funny. And we were all like laughing because it's like, dude, we never see you without a water bottle. Like, he's got an orange Camelback and it's everywhere with him all the time. So it's kind of, it's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, he heart punched that deer and you would think like, oh, you know, it's an easy trail. And oddly, the deer ran, 50 yards or so.
Mm-hmm.
But I did tell him if he wants an award for who shoots a doe back in the game lands the furthest, he wins because
it.
it was like a mile and a half.
I wonder if because he seems to be pretty conscious of his hydration levels, I wonder if that's part of the reason why he went downhill so quick. He's not used to being dehydrated at all.
Well, I did kind of mention that because normally, like, I'll just bring a little bit with me. And I was like, well, this is why we did, he and I did a spring shed hunt upstate this spring. And I was getting pretty tired at the end of the second day. Like, we did like 13 miles the one day. He's like, well, you haven't eaten anything. You haven't really drank much water. I'm like, yeah, I'm prepping myself, man. Like, I want to be like, don't need it.
Yep. It sounds dumb, but there is a little bit to that. I mean, I do the same thing when I run, and I try to. A lot of times in the summer, I try to time my runs around the hottest part of the day, and it sucks, but it gets you used to those conditions because when you're, you don't think about it in the whitetail world as much, but there are times where you're out there and you're really working your ass off, and it's not like the typical whitetail hunt that a lot of people think about. You start bumping up onto a Western style hunt as far as exertion levels and stuff. And so, I don't work in the medical profession. I'm not giving medical advice here. I'm just saying it's good to understand a little bit of that misery that you might have to go through and be tolerant of it, because if you're not tolerant of it and it hits you, you're in trouble. Yeah.
I mean, and you're right too. They did, actually my wife and Seth and a few of our other friends, they did like a half marathon out in Northwest PA in, like the elk range this year. I think I might have mentioned that to you, but, they were all running in really hot weather here because it's a lot, our temperatures in like the southeast corner of PA are a lot hotter than that nice mountain breeze you have. So they were training really hard in that hot weather. And Seth did mention how more difficult it was to run in that heat versus running in the mountains felt like super easy then.
Yeah. I mean, you can see if you run enough, you can see just your splits, like your time per mile. If you head out and it's 50 degrees, you'll be like running at peak condition. And if it's 85 degrees and it's humid, those times are just going to suck. And it's intuitive, obviously, but you get really aware of it when you go out a lot and you push yourself in those conditions.
Yeah. And with that kind of stuff, they worked hard at that. And you're right. Like they always were mentioning the same things you did about splits and times and things like that. So
yeah, it's the same thing. What it does for you. Yeah. Obviously there's a physical benefit to learning about your body and pushing it, but the mental thing is huge. And it's, we talk about this all the time, but it's one of the reasons why a lot of people go elk hunting once. Like when you live in a lot of places, especially east of the Mississippi, training for an elk hunt is very difficult. You just can't replicate it. You can't replicate the altitude, and you can't really find a way to pretend you're mountain climbing. There's just no way around it. And so, you get out there and it's always your body could probably handle it. You can get in good enough shape to do the physical part. It's the mental part that people just lose it on. And it's like, you could listen to Cameron Haynes all day long or anyone tell you what to do. It doesn't matter. Like you're accountable for that part, and you have to understand that you can't know till you get there. And then once you do it, you find out whether you're the person who's going to go back or whether you're the person who's like, I'm heading back to PA and I'm staying there.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy pretty much. Most of the guys I get to hunt with are, they have a pretty strong mental game, so that ends up being good. So
yeah, that helps a lot. What about you? You texted me this story about your buddy who had a little bow mishap. What happened there?
So hunting the same general area. This area is probably altogether about 10,000 acres when you add like the state forest and different sections that are in that general area that they've been hunting. Um, so uh, this guy Nate, he's not ever shot a buck. He's in the game to shoot anybody. He's been hunting for 18 years. He shot plenty of deer. Had a few opportunities at bucks in the past that just didn't pan out. But he really poured a lot of time into scouting this year, and really learning like some like finding some overlooked areas and things like that. So he got himself into a nice mucky thick swamp and perfect early season spot, and he had been seeing a lot of really nice bucks and in bachelor groups in the summertime that he'd been keeping an eye on, and he kind of had an idea that they were using this swamp as bedding as it got closer to the season. So he got in pretty early in the afternoon, had a perfect set, got up in his tree. I think it took him probably an hour and a half to get into the swamp quietly because it's so thick. And I think probably about an hour and a half before dark, which, if you're getting a buck to come in that early is just, he's definitely in the right spot. Sees this 10-pointer coming in, thrashing trees through the brush. And I guess it got to about 27 yards, pulled back his bow nice and smooth, took his time settling his pin, and he pulled the trigger on his release, and his arrow shot straight down, just barely missing his foot. And his string popped off his cam. And, the buck did the typical look over, snort, and gone. So it was a little bit of a heartbreaker for him because that was like, basically his best opportunity he's ever had at a buck with his bow, and definitely the biggest buck he'd ever had an opportunity at. So he was a little heartbroken for a while.
Do you know if when he was packing in there, he had his bow strapped to his pack?
I believe he did.
Yeah.
And we all had some different theories. Some people said maybe he overdrew when he was excited and busted a bearing or something. I thought maybe he had like a stick stuck in the cam wheel. And actually that ended up, he took it to, there's a archery shop not too far from here that he took it to, and they think that he had something stuck in there because nothing seemed to be broken to them. They did a good look over and fixed it up for him. They just think something got stuck in his cam, and when the string rolled back over the wheel, that it just derailed it. So,
when that's never happened to me. That happened to a buddy of mine one time when we were turkey hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get into a tree stand, and I settle in, the first thing I do is pick up my bow and draw and aim at stuff through my shooting lanes every single time. Partially for that reason, because I've seen just this year, I think I was in Minnesota hunting, and I got into my stand and drew my bow, and the way that the arrow came back on the rest, it was kind of like shaking. Like you could hear it, and I went, okay, something's wrong. Well, my launcher arm on my rest had come loose. And so it was just a matter of, tighten two little screws on there back to normal. But if I hadn't checked that, I would have shot at, if a deer came in, I would have never noticed that drawing on a deer. And it would have screwed up my point of impact. I promise you it was that loose. And little stuff like that. I honestly think that when you hear about, shot low, shot high, hit him way off or whatever, like 5% of those happen because of things we're just not aware of that happen to our bow, because nobody's shooting the same amount during the season as they are preseason. Right. And your peep sight moves an eighth of an inch up or down, your point of impact moves up or down. Little things like that really make a big difference. And we just don't really pay attention to them. We assume when you go out, that it's going to be just like your deer rifle. Oh, I didn't bump it around or anything. It's going to be spot on. Like there's a lot of little stuff that can go wrong, and it's like string and cable material now. It gets wet, gets dry, gets hot, gets cold. Yep. Lots of different stuff happens, and it's like just a little check. It's the same reason why I've almost always started taking a couple practice shots before I go out in the evening. I don't do it in the morning, obviously. Yeah. Just because of that. Just if something goes wrong, you want to know then, not when that 10-pointer that you've been hunting for 18 years walks
in. I know, man. And it's a bummer. He did, he actually checked it. I I don't know if he was shooting the day before or if he shot before he went out that afternoon, but he sent me a picture of the target. He's like, look, I was hitting this at 30 yards, like, and he was hitting, $half at 30 yards.
Yeah.
Before he went out, and he was like, I checked everything because I knew I was going to see something in there, but
he wedged something in there. I mean,
we had to have.
That's one of the things when you strap a bow to your pack and go through brush, that's one of those things that can happen.